He held it up like it was a souvenir from a war he never fought in. "This little gadget," he said, spinning my hardware token between two fingers like a magician prepping a trick no one asked for. "It's charming, nostalgic even, but let's be honest, David's process is outdated. Except my name isn't David, it's Eva. And that token, that charming little thing he just mocked in front of the whole finance team, it wasn't some novelty from the early 2000s. It was the last physical link in a triple authentication protocol I spent 6 years embedding into our treasury infrastructure." Then he clicked. One smug little click on his oversized MacBook, like he was swiping left on everything I'd built, and a pop-up danced across my screen. "Access revoked. Approver rights removed by finance lead." Just like that. Like I'd never been the reason not $1 left the company without 2 signatures, time-locked encryption, and an audit trail longer than his resume. My jaw didn't drop. My hands didn't shake. I just blinked once, closed the accounting console, and slid the token back into the drawer like a priest folding a flag at a funeral. That's when I knew they were walking into a storm in flip-flops. Hey, real quick, if you're listening to this and haven't subscribed yet, hit that button and tap the like. I know it seems small, but it tells the team these stories matter. Seriously, 97% of people never subscribe, and it makes a huge difference. Thank you. Anyway, he thought he was performing. New guy energy, fresh out of a startup incubator that probably taught him to call himself a financial futurist on LinkedIn. He had the kind of smile that made you feel like you were already late to a party you didn't want to attend. "From now on," he said, turning to the team, "we'll be streamlining treasury with a flat sign approval model. Faster, cleaner, scalable." Translation: he wanted wires moving with a single click and zero friction. He wanted to be the god of liquidity, moving millions like he was flipping pancakes. I stared at the screen. No more admin permissions, no second layer review, no requirement for token-paired validation. It was like watching someone rip the airbags out of a car to make it go faster. Nobody looked at me. Not the analysts, not the accounts payable lead, not even Miriam from procurement, who once cried in my office over a delayed vendor check and told me I was the only adult in the building. So I stood, quietly, picked up my legal pad, walked out of the glass-walled conference room with my spine still intact. He didn't stop me. Why would he? In his mind, I was just legacy infrastructure. One of Marcus's people, the founder, before his time. Back when things ran slow and safe and people triple-checked numbers before pressing send. At my desk, I opened a locked drawer and dropped the token inside. Shut it softly. No drama. I didn't need to slam it. The system was still live. He'd shut off my panel, sure. But the circuit? The circuit was still humming. What he didn't understand, and what no one in that meeting room seemed to realize, is that there's a difference between access and authority. Access is what they gave him with a dashboard and a click. Authority? That's written in the bones of the process. And I built the bones. So I filed the revocation notice in a personal folder, logged out of all company systems, and left the building like a ghost stepping out of its own story. No scene, no tears. Just one last look at the people, still pretending they knew what they were doing. They thought I'd go quietly, and I did, but not gone, just waiting. The HR rep didn't even look me in the eye when she handed over the paper. She mumbled something about policy-based revocations and workflow transitions like she was reading straight off an HR thesaurus. The line that mattered was this: access revoked by finance lead, no cause listed. Not misconduct, not layoff. Just a quiet burial. They hadn't fired me. That would have triggered severance, a legal review, a conversation. No, they took the cheaper route, stripping me of functional access while leaving the body warm, technically employed but strategically useless. I could have fought it. Could have marched into Marcus Raincrest's old corner office before they painted over his nameplate and turned it into a damn espresso lounge, and reminded them that I'd written the treasury policy from scratch when this place couldn't afford chairs that matched. But why? They'd already decided I was obsolete, so I left. Not because I was weak, but because I had no intention of staying to mop up after their mess. No goodbye email, no farewell cupcakes, just a silent ghosting. I took the elevator down alone, My badge still worked, barely, and I used it one last time to tap out at the parking garage. Then I drove home in silence, windows cracked, radio off, the air thick with that metallic scent of endings. My cat met me at the door like nothing had changed. She still wanted dinner. That's the thing about animals. They know what matters. I poured myself a whiskey, sat at my desk, and pulled open the file drawer I hadn't touched since Marcus's funeral. Legacy signatory authority, enforceable. 3 manila folders, 1 USB drive, and a printed document I'd hoped never to use. Back when we upgraded to multi-factor treasury authorization, the bank required a clause, buried deep in the custodial contract. I remember the meeting like it was yesterday. Marcus leaned back in his chair and said, "Eva, let's not give anyone a kill switch they don't understand." So I made sure of it. 1 clause, 15 words. Custodial authority may not be reassigned without original token deactivation through designated banking channel. The token, my token, the same one the new treasurer had twirled in his fingers like a joke, the one I'd slid back into the drawer with a calmness I didn't even know I still had. See? The system wasn't just about login credentials or dashboard privileges. It was built on a handshake protocol between the token and the bank's back-end system, a kind of digital notarization. And unless that token was formally decommissioned by me in person through a secure sequence they didn't even know existed, the system would continue to wait. No override, no reroute, no oops, forgot to update permissions. They shut me out. But the vault still had my fingerprint on it. And legally, that mattered. The moment they pushed me aside, they created a ghost approval loop, a loop only I could close. I sat there for a while, sipping my drink. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. There's a flavor beyond anger. It's the sharp calm that comes after being underestimated for so long you forget what it felt like to be seen. They thought the system would adjust to their needs. What they didn't know? I didn't build it to serve them. I built it to protect the money, and the money still trusted me. I opened a new notebook. Wrote down a single phrase, no transfer over 10 million without legacy handshake. Then I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and let them sleep on the mess they'd made. Tomorrow, they'd learn that access is easy to give. But authority? Authority remembers who earned it. Monday always starts the same, overconfidence dressed in business casual. At exactly 8:06 a.m., their new golden boy sat at the helm of the Treasury console, probably sipping some overpriced oat milk espresso, eager to show the CFO how fast he could move money. He had a calendar reminder titled Priority Disbursement, Phase 1. That alone told me he didn't understand the system. The real approvals don't live in calendars. They live in thresholds, in logic gates, in cold, quiet code. First attempt, $12 million outbound marked Vendor Consolidation Batch A, a wire that had always required dual authentication, me and one other. That's how we kept it clean. That's how we kept this company's name out of the headlines. But I wasn't there. The console blinked. Not red, not failed, just blinking. Pending secondary approval, awaiting legacy token handshake. They tried again. Same result. They tried from a different console, then a different user account. I watched it all from the audit shadow portal. Yes, the one they forgot I had created and mirrored to my home environment for continuity testing. No alerts went out. No errors flashed across dashboards. The system was working just as I'd designed, quietly, precisely, and without forgiveness. By 9:23 a.m., they logged a ticket with internal IT, wire system glitching. The poor support tech, Ryan, bless him, ran diagnostics for 2 hours and came up empty. He even tried to escalate to the API vendor, but the vendor pointed right back at the documentation I had personally signed. Legacy custodial token required for Tier 3 disbursements. At 11:14 a.m., the second wire jammed, $4.8 million to a construction supplier in Nevada, then another at 11:37, and another. By noon, there were 7 transactions backed up in the pipe, all flashing the same gentle warning like a prayer on loop, awaiting legacy handshake. Contractors started calling. A materials shipment flagged for customs clearance was denied at the port because payment hadn't processed. I saw the note in their ERP system. Need confirmation of funds to release cargo. Their procurement lead tried calling the finance department twice. Got routed to voicemail. Nobody reached out to me. That part? That was almost poetic. There's this belief in corporate environments that the systems we build are obedient, that once we're gone, the machines will learn to love their new masters. But the thing is, good systems don't chase people. They wait. And mine waited with the patience of stone. By 1:00 p.m., I made a sandwich, watched my cat chase a bottle cap across the living room, glanced over at the terminal still tracking live admin logs. One junior analyst had typed, "Override handshake approval token" into the command line. The system replied, "Insufficient permissions. Custodial override not authorized." I didn't laugh. That's not what this was for. I just nodded once. Close the terminal. It wasn't a power trip. It was protocol. I didn't build the system for revenge. I built it because money without friction is chaos. Because somewhere between Marcus's first million and the company's current billions, people forgot that accountability isn't a feature. It's a foundation. So when their shiny new CFO tried to move millions with nothing more than a confident click and a shallow understanding, the system did what it was built to do. It waited. And so did I. By mid-afternoon, the finance floor was unraveling faster than a budget spreadsheet under a quarterly review. Slack lit up like a slot machine on fire. Where's the override? Did anyone get Eva's off-boarding checklist? Is there a backup token? One poor intern named Luke asked, "Can we just copy the token?" And someone actually responded with a thumbs-up emoji before realizing how biometrically idiotic that suggestion was. The treasurer, still cocky in his performance fleece vest like he'd just come from giving a TED Talk on disruption, marched into the CFO's office with that same casual arrogance he'd used to toss my token aside. I wasn't there, but I know exactly how it went. "She's gone," he said. "We don't need her." But the system said otherwise. And by 3:17 p.m., the bank chimed in to remind them. I was watching a rerun of some cooking show, half listening, when my personal phone buzzed. Unknown number. Area code matched the bank's corporate headquarters. I let it ring out. A minute later, it went to voicemail. I didn't need to listen. I knew the voice, the tone, the language they'd use. I'd been on the other end of that call dozens of times over the years, helping resolve blocked wires for clients who thought authorized just meant having a company email address and a LinkedIn profile. They'd say it calmly but firmly. "We only accept legacy token pairings for wire initiations over $10 million. Then the real hit. That protocol has not been removed. Because it couldn't be removed. That protocol was part of the original security contract, drafted back when Marcus still took paper checks and insisted every dollar be traceable back to a fingerprint, a timestamp, and a goddamn paper trail signed in triplicate. We'd built it airtight, not because we were paranoid, but because we understood risk. And now? Now that risk was blooming like black mold under their freshly painted efficiency. At 3:42 p.m., I saw a new thread pop up in the internal IT chatter, one of the ones that used to ping me before they buried me under Finance Legacy Archived. Urgent. Does anyone have contact info for Eva J? No reply. 2 minutes later, another message. Legal asking about token protocol documentation. Please escalate. The treasurer tried to front it out. That was his move. Swagger through the storm and act like the thunder was just applause. But swagger doesn't bypass security layers built with teeth. By 4:15, the bank had escalated the block to their internal compliance team. That meant someone had flagged the halted wires as non-conforming transactions. That meant internal red alerts. That meant audit flags. That meant very bad things. I imagined him pacing behind that glass-walled conference room, the same one where he'd mocked my charming token while dangling it like a keychain souvenir, probably Googling phrases like Treasury Protocol Error Resolution or Urgent Wire Release No Approver. None of it would help, because the bank didn't care about his title. They didn't care about his startup resume or his board connections or his buzzword-soaked emails. They cared about one thing, protocol, and that protocol didn't recognize him. Only one token could release those funds. And that token, it was still sitting in my drawer, untouched, fully functional, and trusted. That was the beauty of it all. I didn't need to lift a finger. I didn't need to send a single snarky email or post a revenge meme. This wasn't some vindictive backdoor sabotage. It was pure architecture, precision, not pettiness, because revenge fades. But well-written policy, That lives forever. They say when legal gets involved, it means someone bled on the paperwork. By Tuesday morning, the bleeding was visible. In emails, in ticket logs, in the vein throbbing on the CFO's forehead. The treasurer had gone quiet. No more slack cheerleading or coffee-fueled monologues about agile liquidity models. Just silence. And a hell of a lot of it. The legal team didn't waste time. No announcements, no all hands, just a quiet message from the general counsel to the head of IT. Please provide complete documentation for all current Treasury authorization workflows. Include legacy protocols, custodial handoff procedures, and token decommission history. Now here's the thing about lawyers. They're not interested in what should have happened. They want what's on paper. And paper? Paper still belonged to me. I watched the whole thing unfold from the comfort of my living room, a lukewarm mug of peppermint tea in hand, audit logs glowing on my second monitor like Christmas lights for accountants. They dug deep, pulled archives, found the master custodial framework dated 2019, my framework, stamped and countersigned by Marcus himself. I still remember the smell of his cologne in that room when he initialed the bottom of each page with surgical care. Buried in the section 6.2, halfway down a page no one had read in 4 years, was the line that snapped its spine in half. Custodial override rights remain active until formal transfer is processed via notarized signature from prior token holder. Not digital sign-off, not auto-delegation, not revocation by superior, notarized signature, from me, and they didn't have it. I imagine the room went quiet, fingers off keyboards, mouths partially open. Someone probably whispered, "Wait, are we sure this is still valid?" And some poor junior attorney, fresh out of law school and still caffeinated from her 7 a.m. espresso, replied, "It's embedded in the bank contract. It's enforceable." That's when IT froze, not in panic, in that horrible moment of realization that no amount of coding or admin privilege could override a clause signed in ink and backed by federal compliance standards. The irony? I'd built that clause for them, to protect them from the very thing they were now doing to themselves. Unauthorized, undocumented power swaps by people too arrogant to read footnotes. One IT manager flagged the problem in the escalation thread. Token still physically exists. Protocol says original custodian must retire it in writing. We never received that. Another line followed. We pulled her badge, not her authority. That one made me smile. I didn't gloat. Didn't celebrate, just sat with it, like a pianist listening to their composition being played perfectly in a room they'd already left. They had the dashboard, they had the title. But the system? The system still had me in the bloodstream. It's funny how authority isn't loud. It doesn't stomp or scream. Real authority just waits. And when it's needed, it doesn't knock. It appears. As policy. As proof. As the last line on a contract that someone thought didn't matter. Turns out I was never their liability. I was their insurance policy. And now they were trying to drive without it. They didn't even try to hide the tension anymore. By Wednesday morning, the panic had migrated, left finance like a virus looking for fresh lungs and settled into the lungs of legal, compliance, and executive operations. I knew the smell of that kind of desperation. Recycled conference room air, burnt coffee, and whatever stress cologne the CFO had drowned himself in that day. At 9:02 a.m., a recurring calendar invite popped up across 4 departments. Bank compliance, urgent. No notes. Just the kind of title that makes interns hold their breath and directors suddenly remember they had another call. I wasn't invited, obviously, but I didn't need to be. The audit trail told the story. The system logs, the failed wire queues, the locked handshake protocols. It was all speaking louder than I ever could. The call started smoothly, I imagine, the usual bank pleasantries. Thanks for joining. Hope you're well. That fake calm before someone drops a thermonuclear policy clause in your lap. But halfway through, the bank's compliance officer, a woman named Meredith, who once told me I was the only finance lead she ever trusted not to cut corners, posed the question that changed everything. Was the original signatory notified of access termination in writing? Silence, not a pause. Silence, and not the kind that leaves room for the clarification, the kind that confirms everything. Meredith waited exactly 4 seconds, long enough to let the discomfort bloom. Then she spoke again. Even tone, no drama, just finality. Then we cannot process further wires. You've removed your sole verified approver without transition. That was it. That was the sound of a door shutting in slow motion. A heavy vault door, the kind you don't reopen without a damn good reason and a key only one person holds. I imagined the CFO sitting at the end of that polished boardroom table, staring blankly at the speakerphone like it had just betrayed him. The treasurer, probably pale, sweating through his performance fleece, and legal, flipping through documents they'd read too late, too fast, realizing they'd misread not just the clause, but the entire architecture of control. They'd assumed approval was a button. They'd never realized approval was a person. Me. And I wasn't gone. I was just unreachable. Not angry, not bitter, just quiet. The kind of quiet that wraps around a system like Kevlar, protective, unyielding, and uninterested in explanations. From my home terminal, I watched the wire queue fill again. 10, 11, 12 pending transactions. Every single one blinking the same status, awaiting legacy approval. Meredith didn't need to raise her voice. That's the thing about people who deal in compliance. They know the power of restraint. Her tone wasn't harsh. It was colder than that. It was surgical. They'd expected her to fold, to say, "We'll make an exception," or "Let's find a workaround." But you don't make exceptions on custodial authority. You don't work around federally registered signatory chains. You follow the rules. Or the money stops moving. And it had stopped. I closed my laptop, stepped out onto the balcony. The city was humming below, unaware that one of its mid-sized power players had just hit the firewall they never saw coming. Not a hack, not a leak, just a woman they dismissed too quickly, and a system that never forgot her name. The reckoning didn't come with alarms. No sirens, no cinematic music. It arrived in the form of quiet emails with subject lines like urgent, vendor escalation, and treasury disbursement, action required. Shipments were halted across 3 time zones. One of our international suppliers in Rotterdam froze their inventory until confirmation of payment arrived. Confirmation that never did. A construction vendor in Houston issued a formal breach notice. The scheduled disbursement for Q3 capital expenditures was auto-declined by the clearing bank. The number wasn't small. $18.6 million, gone nowhere. Sitting in limbo, untouched and unapproved, because the one person who could approve it had been shown the door without a handshake or a signature. That's when the board finally lifted their heads out of whatever quarterly fantasy they'd been chasing. The first whisper came from an internal assistant who still owed me a favor. The board's asking questions, real ones, the kind that make directors check who logged what and when. Within hours, one name kept showing up. Mine. I wasn't part of the company anymore, not on paper, not on Slack, not in their little Friday newsletter where they spotlighted employees who brought donuts or finished code sprints. But when they started tracing back every single treasury function, disbursement protocols, vendor payment routing, international tax compliance gates, they hit the same node over and over. EJ Holder 101, my systems, my structures, my rules. Someone dug up a legacy compliance diagram from the Treasury Wiki, one that hadn't been updated since Marcus was alive. Right there, in faded PDF ink, it read, "Critical dual control. All transactions above $10 require live approver, active finance role, legacy custodian, EJ Holder 001. And underneath that, a single line in red, custodial role bound to physical token and signature, non-transferable unless decommissioned per protocol. They dismissed me, but they hadn't replaced me, because you can't replace what you don't understand. At 3:14 p.m., during an emergency board call, a director asked the question that had been crawling under the skin of the C-suite all week. Why weren't dual authorities retained during the update? Dead silence. The treasurer tried to pivot, some blabber about modernization and decentralized approval chains, but one of the older board members interrupted with a flat, deadly question. Did you remove a system you didn't build before understanding how it worked? And with that, the audits began. I watched it unfold like a ghost eavesdropping on her own funeral. They traced the trail backward, server logs, protocol documents, Git repos, archived workflows. And everywhere they looked, they found my fingerprints. They found the reason wires didn't fly freely. They found the risk buffers I'd embedded. They found the training manuals I wrote that nobody read. They found the time-stamped approvals, the smart fail-safes, the multi-level redundancies that had protected them from themselves for a decade. They found everything, except me, because I didn't need to be there. My inbox stayed silent. No apology emails, no groveling, no last-minute save-me calls. Just a system quietly telling the truth, one failed transfer at a time. They'd silenced my voice, but not my design. And design? Design doesn't flinch. It doesn't forget. It just executes. So while they scrambled for consultants and compliance advisors and emergency amendments to protocols they never understood, I sat at my kitchen table, brewed tea, and watched the company I once held together begin to come undone. Gently, precisely, and entirely by its own hand. It started with a message from an old colleague, not one of the ones who'd stayed silent in the meeting where they gutted my access. No, this one had always nodded a little longer when I spoke. The kind of man who reads audit logs like bedtime stories. Subject, informal ask, can we talk? Then came the call request. No agenda, no calendar invite, just, Eva, could you maybe walk us through what needs fixing? Not an apology, not a retraction. Just that quiet, clumsy reach people make when they realize the system doesn't run on charm, but on structure. I didn't answer the call. Didn't even let it ring out. Instead, I crafted a single document. Nothing dramatic. No legalese theater. Just 5 pages of clean protocol. I named it exactly what it was. Legacy Custodial Transition Protocol. $1 fee for release. The first page had one sentence in bold, transfer of authority contingent on mutual exit agreement and indemnification. That's it. No accusations. No emotional ransom note, just math and leverage. They had the crisis. I had the cure. But I wasn't interested in being anyone's band-aid. The $1 wasn't for the money. It was ritual, symbolic, a transaction, something that forced them to acknowledge value, even if they'd spent the last month pretending I was a relic. They reviewed it, of course. Legal chewed on it for a few hours, tried to send back a revised draft with softened language, some nonsense about cooperative disengagement. I rejected the revision. Resentment didn't drive me. Precision did. By noon the next day, I had a signed agreement in my inbox. Docu-signed by the CFO, the treasurer, and 2 board members who'd finally understood that you don't remove the keystone and expect the arch to hold. I scanned the signatures. Verified timestamp authenticity. Then, and only then, did I take the token, still sitting in my desk drawer, and slide it into the encrypted hardware port connected to my private console. 3 logins, 2 passphrase handshakes, 1 fingerprint, a soft click, a green light. Deactivation confirmed. The wires cleared in seconds. Funds moved. Backlogs dissolved. Vendors restarted shipments. Customs released cargo. The heartbeat resumed. And me? I didn't even watch the dashboards. I didn't need to. The work was done. Not patched, not hacked, not begged into motion. Resolved. Surgically. I wasn't angry. I wasn't triumphant. I was level. Like resetting the final gear on a machine you'd taken apart, cleaned and reassembled with steady hands. They thought removing me was modernizing. But all they did was sever trust from process. And trust, once lost, doesn't reboot on command. It demands terms. And I made mine. Clean, legal, quiet. No headlines. Just balance. The final board call didn't make headlines, but inside those glass walls, it landed like a quiet detonation. No one said the word fired. Corporate never does. They couched it in the usual polite fiction. Personal leave, restructuring, evaluating alignment. But the phrase that stuck came from the chair himself. Effective immediately, the treasurer will be taking a leave of absence. Translation. The fall guy had been chosen, and the knife had found its mark. Nobody asked where he went. Nobody cared. That's the thing about people who lead with ego. They vanish as easily as they arrive, and the system, if it's built well, doesn't miss a beat. The wires had cleared, yes. The money was flowing, but not without scars. 2 missed disbursements triggered automated alerts in our compliance chain. One of them flagged with a red tag in the Federal Vendor Watch List queue. That alone earned the CFO a 600 a.m. call from a Department of Commerce liaison, asking why our company had failed to meet contractual timelines on a logistics routing project tied to critical infrastructure. Oops. Internal audit documented everything. Emails, Slack threads, access logs, deactivated tokens. Legal didn't bother hiding the paper trail. Why would they? The protocol had held. The collapse wasn't a breach. It was self-inflicted. And as for me, I was on my porch, watching the rain slip down the banister when my phone rang. A voice I didn't know, calm and direct. Ms. Jensen, I'm with Carmichael Freight and Infrastructure. We've been watching the recent situation at your former employer. We're reviewing our own protocols. I said nothing. We'd like to speak with you about designing a custodial framework, independent, secure, with your standards. He didn't need to say more. The subtext was loud enough. We saw what happened when trust gets treated like an app you can uninstall. We're not making that mistake. We set a meeting. I didn't even hesitate. Because the truth is, I didn't want my old job back. I didn't want the apologies, the belated recognition, or the fake humility that always follows the sound of systems breaking. What I wanted, what I earned, was simple. A world where the people who build the backbone of trust aren't tossed aside the moment someone younger learns how to click deploy. In the end, they never got it. Not really. They replaced the locks without asking who held the master key, and while they scrambled to fix what they broke, I never raised my voice, never stormed a meeting, never posted a bitter exit rant on social media. I didn't need to, because the system I built had already told the truth for me. Every blocked transfer, every frozen vendor, every unanswered approval request. Proof. Signed, time-stamped, immutable. They thought I was outdated. But the system never forgot who it trusted first.